Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about where isolation type movements, and I really hate that word, by the way. I'm only using that in the title as clickbait. I honestly know that there is no such thing as isolation. I know it's a make-believe goofy bodybuilder word. What most people usually mean is single joint, right? It's only moving one joint in the body. You can't actually isolate muscles. But when we do single joint movements, oftentimes the brunt of the work is taken by only 1 to 2 muscles, sometimes 3. Yeah, there are as many as 3 sometimes when you've been a single joint. They get used in others, the work gets less dispersed, right? Especially when we cut down to one joint, right? Like when you do a bicep curl, a strict concentration curl, for example, only about 3 to 4 muscles really get worked, right? One of them being the biceps. So, that being said, let's come over to the point. Do these smaller exercises have their place for the strength athlete? And I'm going to say yes, absolutely. They absolutely have their programming place. They can absolutely make you stronger, because ultimately those of us who train for this, including me, we're not training to be beautiful. We're not training for that. We are training to get brutally strong. And oftentimes you'll see a lot of strength athletes, and other people say, well, some of those smaller movements, that's just bodybuilding. But that's not actually true, though, is it? And oftentimes when you'll see the difference here for say, bodybuilding purposes, a bodybuilder will often say they're going to do these smaller movements to fully develop a muscle. Oftentimes they'll say, look, this big multi-joint exercise works all these muscles, but certain heads of the smaller muscle get neglected, and therefore I'm going to do a single joint exercise that works that one head. And that's oftentimes what they're doing, to fully develop that muscle. And if that's your goal, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. And I'm even going to say that guys who power lift and do other strength sports, look, sometimes we do want to look more jacked. And, putting a little bit of muscle in the right place can make you look more jacked, even if it isn't always particularly valuable to you. And I get it, guys. We all do want to look jacked at the end of the day. We want to look big. We're walking down the street, and sometimes that can help. But it doesn't always improve performance. It doesn't always improve performance to take that approach, which means picking a small exercise that works a different performance element. An example, most of our pressing uses more lateral and medial head of the tricep. It doesn't particularly engage the long head. Overhead pressing does more than the others, but it's still not as big of a deal. So you might do a lot of long head work for your tricep to make that upper tricep grow that doesn't get as much stimulation on your pressing, right? That would be an example of what a bodybuilder would probably do. And I think most people get that concept. They're like, okay, that makes sense, right? It makes sense. Bodybuilder might do a lot of work for the side head of their deltoid, because it doesn't get always maybe as much work as the other heads do from all the pressing and pulling. The delts get massively worked. If you do tons of rowing and pressing, your delts are going to be big. It's just that side head, that capped head, may not be maximally big because it doesn't matter that much. So they'll come in and do extra work for it, right? Makes sense. Makes sense. But what about for someone who says, well, I need smaller movements. Where is there a place for me getting stronger? Well, perfect example. Look right here with the J-arm press that I'm doing. I did a bunch of closed grip pressing because a closed grip bench builds your triceps and pecs and everything else and makes you a stronger bencher, right? I do most of my volume with a closed grip because the wider grip's hard on my shoulders. And the closed grip gives me a better stimulus to fatigue ratio, less inflammation, but it's there to build my triceps and pecs and everything else. Now, when we do a lot of pressing, what is it that we find? Triceps don't always get as much work as we would like by themselves. In other words, a flat bench, closed grip bench, all of that does tend to build the chest and the front delts very, very effectively. But depending upon how you're built, and especially if you even look at EMG data, it doesn't always maximally recruit the triceps as much as we would like. They get worked, but if we start thinking in terms of maximum recoverable volume, on a movement like that, what is it that we find? That our chest and our front delts might be fatigued after so many sets that we can't even push more weight. If we tried to do more work for them, we would overreach. We would sometimes get less gains, right? It would do less for us. And historically, I've tended to train that way in the past, and it's left me with personally triceps that need more work. So I put a lot more work into my triceps. I need them. I need more tricep. And that's the problem we have with some of the bigger lifts, is that they may work the triceps, but do they give us maximum stimulation? No, probably not, because the tricep is used heavily and it may be a deal breaker in your bench. It may be the muscle limiting you from putting another 30, 40 pounds on your bench when you lift to a max. But under your actual training loads, it may be getting less total stimulation, right? It may be getting less total stimulation. So we look at it and say, okay, so can I throw in a smaller exercise to go ahead and push the training volume up? Because maybe your benching is barely hitting the minimum effective volume for the triceps, or it might be below it while still giving you great pec and front delt growth. Or even your close grip pressing in my case. So we say, okay, maybe I need a smaller exercise to make those heads grow, rather than looking like a bodybuilder does and say, okay, the long head doesn't get much work, so I'm going to train the long head. We look at it and say, well, I need the lateral and medial heads to bench more. They have recovery left. And if you have a muscle that's a primary mover and it has a lot of recovery left because it isn't getting used quite as hard on your big movements, you have room. You have room to train it. And if you train it, it will grow because it has recoverable volume left, right? It can handle more work. And if it can handle more work and it can recover from more work, it will probably grow if you make it do more work. And if it grows, it gets stronger and your big lifts go up. Okay? So we might do something like a JM press, like I was doing right there, or a rolling dumbbell extension. Right? Well, we could argue board presses, but that's a big movement. So you might do something like that. In my case, I'm using the JM press. Other people might prefer a rolling JM press or a Tate press. Right? These are all smaller tricep exercises. We're not working the muscle differently than the bench. We're not working the different heads that get worked as a priority in the bench. That's still focused on the heads that the bench hits, but giving them more direct work. And if we can make those stronger, bench will go up. Same thing, we might look at a supplemental lift like a row. We could take this Pendlay row, for example, that I'm doing with the axle bar. All right, this is an important movement for me. This is a grip trainer for me. It's a lat trainer for me. Trains my forearms, all this other stuff. I don't have the biggest biceps in the world, or brachialis or any of that. I'm not known for my arm development, to say the least. And it's not that my arms don't measure pretty big. It's that relative to my proportions, they aren't. I think guys, when they meet me in person, they're surprised that my arms are probably bigger than they think they are. They think I have maybe 14-inch arms or something. It's like, no, they're probably bigger than you think they are. But because of my proportions, they don't look big, right? And we know that. We know that. So we take something like that and realize, well, if my biceps and brachialis and radial brachialis are becoming a limiting factor on my rows, and my back is fatigued, because what happens when we train with a lot of power movements? I do a lot of good mornings. I do a lot of deadlifting. My back is really fatigued. My back takes a lot of hit. It takes a lot of beating throughout my training week. That can affect my ability to even do lat exercises like that. So if they're fatigued and my biceps aren't getting fully worked, or the other muscles involved with some of these hammer curls, then wouldn't I benefit from doing some hammer curls? Like in this case, I'm just using my football bar because I don't have heavy enough dumbbells. People would say, well, why do that instead of a supine curl? Well, these are easier on your tendons, and because I want more than just the biceps to grow. A hammer position uses more brachialis, uses more radial brachialis in the forearm. Those muscles are all important for rowing. All of them, not just the bicep. Yes, the bicep matters a lot. In fact, if my biceps and all of the muscles in my arm get thicker and stronger, what will happen? Well, I'll probably get stronger at the rows. If I get stronger at the rows, because I'm making sure that one muscle that maybe is being a little underworked gets stronger, my rows will go up. Well, the rows are a very important supplemental lift for me. So if we look at it from that perspective, wouldn't these hammer curls help my entire body get bigger and stronger? Of course they will. Because if the rows are one of my key supplemental lifts, and that arm development is holding back my performance and overload on them a little bit, or for you or anyone else, that extra work could be really beneficial in the long term. In the short term, it won't help you, but what about 6 months down the road? right? Coming in and working these different muscles can be beneficial because any muscle that's used importantly in a lift that you care about, you need to maximally develop that muscle. You need to maximally develop that muscle. And sometimes that is going to require us, because we have different recoverable volumes in our body. Some of our muscles recover better than others. Some of them get hit harder than others, even with the lifts that we care about. And if we have localized recovery left in a muscle that's an important muscle for a lift, we do need to train it with some smaller movements. It would benefit us to do so, right? It'll only make us stronger. It'll only make us stronger. And no one's ever said, man, my triceps are too big and they're not helping me anymore. That's never going to happen. Triceps will never be too big for a bench press. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.